Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. Well, how embarrassed are most Australians when they pick up after the G20 finishes, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, and what do they see? The Australian Prime Minister being referred to as the great blunder from down under. That's how he has been referred to throughout the world, and it's not surprising. He was humiliated by his complete ignorance and failure to recognise that all his talk of climate denial is so ideologically driven, his denial of the science, his continual chanting of his three-word slogans is so out of touch with the rest of the world. And suddenly he got a wake-up check. Basically, the other countries in the G20 had said to our Australian Prime Minister, we want to discuss climate change at the G20 because climate change is an economic issue. Climate change will have a major impact on food security, on physical security, because there will be food shortages, there will be displacement of people, there are extreme weather events occurring all of the time around the world now. People are recognising we live in a climate emergency, and the major world economies recognise that unless they change and decouple economic growth from the use of fossil fuels and the use of non-renewable resources, we won't have a livable planet. That is the fundamental basis on which the energy and the whole economic system needs to be restructured. Everyone else gets it except Australia. Even Prime Minister Abbott's very best friend in the fossil fuel stakes, Prime Minister Stephen Harper from Canada, has today come out and said that the Canadians will actually pledge money to the Green Climate Fund. But not so our Prime Minister. What must the small island states, what must developing countries think about a rich country like Australia refusing to stump up the money to put into a fund to assist them to not only mitigate against things getting worse, but to adapt to what they're already suffering? Saltwater incursion into their freshwater systems, loss of land, inability to be able to irrigate their crops. We are seeing whole island states now in fear that they will have to move. We've had Kiribati buy land in Fiji to try to prepare to relocate their people. In Tuvalu, people are pleading with Australia and other countries to help them as they live in fear of the next storm surge. But not so our Prime Minister. No, he determined that he was going to somehow stare down other countries and claim that because he was the host of the G20, he could get away with stopping the world talking about what the world wanted to talk about, and that is the overwhelming challenge of our time, global warming. And so he was upstaged, blindsided, rolled straight over the top of as China and the United States announced ahead of the G20 their climate deal. Now, their climate deal is very significant. It's significant because it's the first time you've had a developing country commit to a target, to a binding target. And that's what China did by saying that it would ensure that its emissions peaked by 2030. And the United States committed to a 26 to 28% reduction by 2025 on 2005 levels. Now, it's significant because the big thing that had not been able to be gotten through in Copenhagen was the fact that the developing countries were saying that they would not commit to binding targets until developed countries did so. This was a significant breakthrough. And what was the Prime Minister's response? Well, it was pretty typical of a climate denier, of someone who actually doesn't realise how out of his depth he is in a global conversation. He went on to say, oh, he's not going to talk about the China deal because it's what might happen in 16 years' time. Well, wrong, Prime Minister, because if you'd read the small print, you would see this amazing figure from the Chinese. They intend to double their level of renewable energy between now and 2030. Double it so that it's 20% of energy in China from renewable sources. And so they intend to build 1,000 gigawatts, 1,000 gigawatts of energy by 2030. And that is the equivalent, if you wanted to compare it with nuclear industries around the world, that would be the equivalent of a large nuclear power station every week. That is the kind of scale that they're talking about rolling out renewable energy out to 2030. But they are also saying in their 12th five-year plan, which ends in 2016, so we'll be going into their 13th five-year plan, they've identified 7 strategic industries for China: electric vehicles, renewable energy and energy efficiency. Is this starting to click in Australia of where this is going to go? This means that the United States, the European Union, the Chinese are going to be signed up for the biggest and the best investment around the world in renewable energy, in the best and brightest minds that we've got on the planet, to get there and recruit them to be able to build industries and jobs and sustainability into the future. And what have we got in Australia? A Prime Minister who says, I'm not even going to think about that because it's not for 16 years. In order to get where the Chinese need to get in 16 years, they're going to roll out a mega plan to get there. But more particularly, the Chinese are fairly conservative in what they're saying. They said they want their emissions to peak by 2030. In fact, if they get underway in the manner that they're talking about, they're likely to peak a lot sooner than that. And what they're saying is they want their coal imports to peak, emissions to peak by 2020. And that is very bad news. And here in Australia we have the utter and absolute blind stupidity of the Premier of Queensland, Campbell Newman, out today saying that he's prepared to sell off assets in Queensland and actually subsidise the building of coal infrastructure in Queensland, which will be stranded assets. You can't believe the ideological stupidity that we are seeing in this country. The private sector won't fund it. And why won't Campbell Newman actually answer the question? If the private sector doesn't think there's a future in coal infrastructure, why would you waste money? Why would you sell public assets to give private sector a leg up in an industry which is failing? It is a decaying industry. It is beyond belief that this is happening. And we also have a situation where we have got the Europeans out there very strongly committing to the Green Climate Fund, and it's Tony Abbott, our Prime Minister, who blocked the Green Climate Fund being in the communique from the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. He is so isolated. Our country is now totally isolated on the global stage when it comes to addressing global warming. That means we are isolated on the global stage in terms of where economic, business and stimulation and excitement is going to be. We are the rust bucket. We will be the quarry. Only that, because the best brains will have gone to recognising that this is the century in which we get to the low-carbon economy. This is the century in which we roll out electric vehicles. This is the century in which we have fantastic public transport systems to give great amenity to our cities. This is the century where we develop new building materials, where we have energy-efficient buildings, where we have renewable energy rolling out jobs and investment throughout Australia, as we're already seeing. And that's why we have to keep not only carbon pricing, but the clean energy. We need to keep the clean energy investment and also the Renewable Energy Agency. And yet here we have our Prime Minister standing up in front of the world and bragging about getting rid of the carbon price. Unbelievable, getting rid of the carbon price when everybody else sitting around the table is working out how to introduce one. Is looking at what Australia did with our clean energy package and recognising its template legislation, that the International Energy Agency saw it as template legislation, as what developed countries need to do. And our Prime Minister is so out of touch that he thought it was a bragging point to go with his axe the tax, looked around the table and suddenly found no one thought that was a good idea. And then he reverted to talking about his $7 co-payment that he can't get through the Senate. And he just looked like, as the New York Times and Los Angeles Times have said, he looked like an adolescent. He looked like a pimple-faced adolescent on the global stage. How embarrassing for our country, how embarrassing for Australians. We all want to think that when our Prime Minister gets up,
Thank you,
he's
Senator
recognised.
Milne.